I missed the birth of my second child, and the story behind it, why and how, is wild. And this got me thinking, what personal financial steps should we not miss right after we have a kid? So for our main topic, we're going to be discussing the top 5 things you need to do in the way of personal finance for your child after they're born. And taking care of number 4 can very well be the difference between a happy, healthy adult child and one that has a horrible mess to clean up. You're not going to want to miss it. Good morning and welcome to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast. My name is Jay Disberger, your one and only HopeFilled Financial Coach, and I'm happy that you're here with us today. If you've been a HopeFilled Financial follower for a while, you know that I've been expecting my second son, and in the middle of March, he was born, and he came fast. And I want to share this story with you today to get the podcast started and how it was that I missed his birth. Story begins like this. We wake up, it's Tuesday. Amanda didn't sleep very well. She's been having contractions off and on, is thinking she's in prodromal labor or early labor. Doesn't think that it's actual labor, but I'm starting to get the sense that things are actually going to happen today. Because it's so early, she's basically trying to go about her day as is. Her mom's visiting with us, and we're watching our niece this day. So our 1-year-old niece and my 2-year-old son are running around the house. My mother-in-law is helping watch them. And Amanda's just trying to figure out what's going on. And I decide to just log into work as if it were a normal day, but keep an eye on things. I had meetings between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., just back-to-back meetings. And in each of the meetings, it kind of came up, hey, if I need to jump, it's because my wife is currently in labor. Most likely, it's probably pretty early, but that's a thing. So keep that in mind. And it's funny, on some of those meetings, people were like, what are you doing working? And I'm like, we've got plenty of time. And my boss was on one of them. He's like, that can change in 5 minutes, right? And boy, did things change quickly. We ended up having a decent lunch. Amanda was playing cards with her mom and realized that labor was actually picking up, that this was going to be it. It wasn't something that was going to drag on for weeks and weeks. We were going to probably be having a baby that day. And there wasn't too much for me to do at this point other than just kind of be ready. I got work and my personal calendar all situated for the next week around 3 or 3:30. Went out to check on Amanda. She was doing okay. Hadn't quite hit the real heavy active labor yet, but the toddlers were awake. Both babies were up and at 'em. A little early. They normally sleep until around 4. And because Amanda was going into labor earlier than we expected, both cars were pretty low on gas, to the point that I was worried that if we could get to the hospital, we might not be able to get much further. So I said, maybe now's a good opportunity for me to leave, go fill up a car. I can take Oliver with me so that you have a little less going on here and you can just focus on labor. And we typically take the vehicles to Costco to fill up. And this is where things get interesting. Amanda said, well, if you're going to go to Costco, I've got a little grocery list. You might as well go pick some things up, buy us a little bit more time. And I was like, okay. I didn't think much of it. I was calm and chill. She had a 36-hour-long labor with our first. I was in this for the long run, and I realized last time that the thing that I didn't do well was relax. I needed to be a calm presence that was confident and collected. I didn't need to panic. And I think Amanda was doing a good job relaxing through all of this too. I mean, she was sending me to go pick up groceries while she was in labor. That tells you about where we were. So I took Oliver to Costco. We filled up one vehicle, the vehicle that we weren't going to take to the hospital. I was going to make another quick round to fill up the second one after we got the groceries. We walked through Costco. There were some samples going on. I was trying to explain to Oliver that baby Isaac was going to be out of mommy's tummy probably today or maybe tomorrow, and that he'd get to meet him and he'd get to hold him. He's been looking forward to the baby being born for a long time. It's so stinking cute. And I was explaining this as we were going around and getting samples. And some of the people are like, what? As they overhear me talking. And I'm like, yeah, he's going to be a big brother today. And they're like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, it's fine. She's got plenty of time. We got back from our Costco trip and she was full-blown active labor. We were gone for less than an hour and she had gone to the point where contractions were getting serious and I needed to be present there to help. Amanda's sister arrived from work to pick up her daughter to find us working through Amanda's active labor. So she and Amanda's mom, her mom, took the toddlers out front to play with chalk. I took Amanda upstairs and she started working through the contractions with a little bit more of the methods that we do with the breathing and the counter pressures to help her get through the labor. She was taking things one contraction at a time and having me read prayer intentions that she had collected. She had a list of like 80 prayers that she wanted to be reflecting on and praying for in order to help get her mind off of the contraction and onto somebody else's needs. She was trying to take her suffering and offer it up with each contraction. So my job is to manage the list, not only reading the prayer intentions, but crossing them off and going down the list in order to help her. 5 o'clock rolls around and Amanda says, you should probably eat something. Back when she was laboring with Oliver, I refused to leave her side the whole time and just did a horrible job taking care of myself. Bathroom breaks and meal breaks were just not something that I thought about as much. And I think it was maybe because I was a little bit more scared and excited. Fear of the unknown, you know? This time I was a little more relaxed. I went downstairs. There was some corned beef in the crock pot. I came up with a bowl. I was eating it. I'm like, hey, you want some? You know, maybe a little bit of a bite. And she's at the point where she's not able to respond to me. This should be a sign that she's further along in labor than I think. I finish eating in short order. I draw her a bath. She labors in the bath for a little bit and then gets out probably after a half hour or so. And this is the part where she starts to ask to go to the hospital. She starts to ask for an epidural. She starts to ask for it to end. This is my cue to start getting the suitcases together, get them taken to the car. But I'm also trying to take my time a little bit. You see, she had one request before going into labor, and that was to make sure that she labored as long as possible at home. When we had Oliver, she made no progress in the hospital until she got an epidural, and she really wanted to give birth naturally. She figured that she would progress better at home if we stayed at home as long as we could before even thinking about going to the hospital. So my job was to not only comply with what she was asking, but try to buy us a little bit of time. We're getting real close to 6 o'clock. I've double checked the list. I've got bags zipped up. I haven't quite gotten everything into the car. I've only barely started in her water breaks. All right, this is my cue to kind of pick up the pace a little bit. I haul her out of the room. I get Amanda's sister's attention. I'm like, hey, Kara, get these bags down to the car. We're going. I help Amanda get all situated, ready to the car. We are in the car just barely after 6 o'clock. I'm pretty sure we said goodbye and pulled out of the driveway around 6:03, 6:04. I book it down to the hospital. I end up in the left lane with the hazards on. People are clearing the left lane for me. I got a lady who is pushing in the car. I didn't know she was pushing at the time, but I reached my hand over and said, here, hold my hand. She started squeezing it and screaming. And I'm like, oh, she's pushing we're about ready to have a baby in the car. But I was kind of cool and collected. I kept telling myself, probably not as far along as that. We've got some time. Let's just get to the hospital. We get to the hospital and I roll up outside the ER entrance, which is just off of where you need to enter the hospital to get to labor and delivery. I put the car in park and Amanda just gets out of the car. And the contractions are heavy enough that if she has one and I'm not right there, she's going down on all fours, maybe a little hard. So I get out of the car. I don't even stop the car from running. I leave the vehicle running. It's one of the ones where you have a proximity key and a push button. All I would have had to have done is push the button to turn the car off. And I got out feeling so rushed that I didn't do any of that. I didn't even lock the vehicle. It would have been the easiest thing to steal. I get to her side. We get into the hospital. We walk, make it to the check-in desk at the ER. She hits a contraction, goes down on all fours. I'm holding her. We see an employee from the hospital walking by. I'm like, ma'am, can you help us? I'm trying to get her up to labor and delivery. I'm doing my best to be calm. She's like, I don't know where that is. I point down the hall and say, it's just up those elevators on the second floor. She says she's going to go get someone to help us. We never saw her again, and nobody she went to go get to help us ended up finding us, if she found anyone at all. We made it to the elevator after that contraction, made it up the elevator, made it through the first set of doors. The next set of doors is going to be the labor and delivery floor. We are right there. She has another contraction hit, goes down on all fours, where I am just barely out of reach of the telephone you need to ring to get in. They have a camera. They can see us outside, and they're trying to buzz the door in so we can enter. And there's nothing I can do. I'm just helping hold Amanda on the floor. I get a hold of the phone and I'm holding it. I can't reach the button. And then all of a sudden, with light behind it, door opens up, and I'm embellishing a little bit, but it was like a mist of cloud rolled in, and a nurse came through the door with a wheelchair. It was time. And they asked her to get up into the wheelchair, asked me to hold the door. Amanda can't sit in the wheelchair, so she like grabs onto the handlebars and gets her knees on there, and they back her up into it. I tell the nurse that I left the car running and I might need to go get it, and they're like, "Okay, don't worry, you can go get the car and come back." I think you see where this is going. The nurse at the front desk for labor and delivery asks me for Amanda's first name, last name, date of birth, tells me to go move the car, and I book it to the elevator. It is now 6:17, and I only know this because I rang my parents to give them an update. So I got a hold of my parents and started telling them, we're probably going to have a baby within the next hour. They're asking, let us know when the baby's here. I'm like, give me about an hour, don't worry. But I'm also taking it seriously that the baby is on the way. I forgot to mention that as they were wheeling her off in the wheelchair, and they told me to go back and get the car, Amanda yelled out, "You're gonna miss it." And there's a part of me that believed her, and there was a part of me that couldn't believe her as I was moving the car and talking to my family. I get the car to a parking space. I get the hospital bags. There were 2 bags out of the car. And I jog back to the elevators, hang up with my parents. It's somewhere around, I want to say 6:20, 6:21, maybe 6:22. We were definitely off the phone by 6:22 because my mom sent a text to my siblings saying that Amanda's in labor and the baby's on the way. I'm going as fast as I can with these bags. I get back into labor and delivery. They haven't ID'd me or anything. They remember me from getting Amanda there, but they tell me the room number. I go in, 2 doors down, take a left, and I can hear the baby crying. My feet don't stop moving, but my torso bends down, and I set the bags down by the side of the room as I walk past the curtain, and I can still see that one nurse is holding Amanda's leg up, and just around her, I can see 2 baby feet poking up in the air at the corner of the delivery bed. They weren't set up at all for the baby. The doctor wasn't even there. The nurses had caught the baby and were working on things. I came around. The lady who caught the baby is introducing herself to me. I don't remember a word she said. I wanted to be by my wife's side holding her hand. I get around to Amanda. I get down by the side of the bed, and another nurse comes over and hands me a pair of scissors and says, "Dad, do you want to cut the cord?" Isaac is crying, but he is healthy. He is a healthy baby boy with all 10 fingers and all 10 toes. I cut the cord, and they take him over to the warming table as Amanda works on the placenta. And I don't know if it was just the way that the nurses wanted to manage the situation, but they didn't bring Isaac up to Amanda to do skin to skin right away, which made Amanda think that there might have been something wrong with the baby. So kid's crying over on the warming table. I think it's a panda something or other, and she's worried about him. And is like, someone needs to go comfort the baby. And I'm just holding Amanda's hand saying, I'd go comfort him, but I want to be here for you. And she's like, no, go comfort the baby. So I take my shirt off, I go over and I hold the baby. And I get to, for the first, 20 minutes or so, just hold that little baby close to me. And the doc ends up walking in and goes, "So, guys, you could come in a little sooner. You didn't have to wait that long." Remember, Amanda wanted to labor at home as long as possible. She explicitly told me months ago, it's okay if we get really close or even have a kid in the car. That would be better than going to the hospital too early. Well, that was about as close as I could get it. And I want to share with you what happened while I was out moving the car here. And they got her into the delivery room. She got up out of the wheelchair, was stripping down for delivery, took a couple steps forward, had a contraction at the edge of the bed. The nurse described it as she popped a squat. And when she stood up, she gave birth to the head standing up. The nurses asked her to crawl into the bed. Amanda's like, "I don't know how." And they said, "Just get into the bed." She got into the bed. 1 or 2 pushes later, the baby came out. And that's what happened while I was moving the car. It's incredible. It's crazy. And I missed it. I don't know if it was for better or worse, but I missed it. I was joking with the nurses later, "Hey, we didn't come in and use the delivery room for labor for a long period of time. Can we get a discount?" I made a similar joke when they discharged us after only spending 1 night in the hospital. We got to leave just before the second night would have started. And as I'm recording this, baby isn't even 2 weeks old yet, and Mama's recovering pretty well. We love our little baby. He's so chill. Isaac's a good kid, and I'm very happy and very blessed to have a healthy wife, a healthy baby, and a toddler who absolutely adores his baby brother. And since we've been home, I've been doing my due diligence and my job by working through the personal finance and administrative stuff that needs to happen after having a kid. And it got me thinking. A good episode, a good main topic would be the top 5 things that you need to do, personal finance wise, after you have a baby. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that story. I know it's a little different for what we normally do on the podcast, but again, I figured you'd appreciate it, and it's a nice segue into the things that you got to do after having a baby. The first one, it doesn't really count as something you have to do after, unless you forgot to do it before. So this doesn't count on the list. It's a 0. It's update your W-4. And the reason that you need to do that is pretty relevant right now because, well, it's tax season. If you get a big refund from the IRS, it's because too much money, too much of your paycheck was withheld, and they owe it back to you. In essence, you could think of it as they got to borrow money from you at 0% interest throughout the year. So I don't like having a big refund. I don't want to lend my money to the government interest-free for any duration of time. I would really like my tax filing to have a refund that's relatively small. This year, it's, I believe, under $100. And I don't expect it to be much bigger for 2024. Reason being is on January 1st, I called HR and I said, hey, I am going to be having a baby this year. I would like to add another dependent on my W-4 and increase my deductions and reduce my withholdings. Now, there's a little bit of a risk doing this before the baby's born because if something tragic were to happen and the baby doesn't make it, you have a situation where you had too little withheld and you'll owe a lot come April 15th. So the 0th item is when you're ready, update your W-4 so that your withholdings are going to be too much and you're not lending the government money. Okay, let's move on to item number 1, and that's going to be calling insurance. When you have a baby, insurance needs to be updated. Most importantly, probably, in my opinion, is your health insurance. Now, we covered it recently on the podcast. I don't have health insurance. I have a cost-sharing ministry, and the situation is the same. I am responsible for calling them up after the baby's born and saying, hey, we got to add this kid to well, it's not a policy for me, but if you have insurance, it's a policy. You want to make sure that they get coverage right away in case something medically happens. Now, you may very well need proof of the birth. The hospital will very often give you what amounts to a trinket of a birth certificate, but it can be used to help prove that you had a child born at that hospital. And I'm pretty sure that most insurances would take something from the hospital as evidence that the baby's born ahead of you getting your official state-issued birth certificate for the kid. But there are other insurance things that you need to update too. For example, homeowners or renters insurance, they're going to want to know that you have an extra person living in the house. And here's a big one, we're going to touch on this later, identity theft protection. If you pay for identity theft protection, you're going to want to add your kid on that ASAP. And while you're updating all the insurance stuff, you now have a life event that qualifies you, most likely, to update the benefits that your employer offers you. Now, I grouped all of the insurance things into one bucket, but there's something that you need to do to update some of the insurances, and that's going to be getting state-issued evidence that you have a kid. You need to get the birth certificate, and you're going to need a social security number for the baby. Now, I always thought that was odd. Why does a baby need a social security number? Well, that's going to be easier for me to just let CGP Grey answer this in his video. Your social security card is insecure.
And if you're trying to keep track of everyone, as say the United States Tax Department might want to do, it can be a real problem, particularly in the pre-computer days. Hey, wait a minute, look at this number just lying around, the Tax Department said. It's not supposed to be used as an ID number, said the Social Security Department. There are security reasons you should yoink. Thus, the Tax Department piggybacked off of the work the Social Security Department did assigning working adults a number, which made tracking taxes easier.
Now, because I'm only taking clips from this, you should know that when the United States became a country, the citizens did not want a universal citizen ID card or number. So we didn't have something that could be used to track people. The Social Security Administration was the first time that something kind of existed like that, but it wasn't built to be a secure ID.
And they highly encouraged parents to get a Social Security number for their children by tying it to a tax discount. Crazily, counting children for tax rebates used to run on the honor system. The U.S. Tax Department told people, 1, we will give you a discount on your taxes for each child you have, and 2, write down your number of children. Please be honest, we don't have a way to check. Which was just asking, nay, begging people to lie, which they did, birthing on paper millions of phantom children. But after requiring each kid to have a Social Security account number connected to a birth certificate before the parents could get the tax discount, all those phantoms faded away.
And that's why your baby needs a Social Security number right away. So A, you can get a tax break, and B, the government can verify that your tax-deductible dependent exists.
This turned the Social Security number into a unique number that all citizens had right from the start, and that made it easy for lots of other places like banks and schools and companies and landlords to also piggyback on the number as an easy way to keep track of people without having to come up with their own systems, and to be able to exchange information about people between institutions.
And this includes insurance companies. I'm pretty sure for both of my kids, the hospitals that they were born in sent the form for the Social Security number off, and we received the Social Security card in the mail within a couple weeks. For the birth certificate, though, we had to go to a particular location and pay for those to be printed in person. So we had a little bit of footwork to do to get that document. But once we had them together, well, then we could be dangerous in updating things. And that brings me to the third thing that you probably need to update, and that's going to be your will alongside the beneficiaries on your retirement accounts. Now, it's important to update your will when you have a kid for 2 main reasons. One is you don't want them to be left out of the will. If something horrible were to happen to you, and let's say you had another kid or kids before this one, they're in the will. They get left stuff. What about the new guy? What about your new child? If you don't update it so that they're in there, well, are they excluded from the will? I'm sure you can have a will that's written so that subsequent children get a fair share of inheritance, but it's always going to be better to have them explicitly listed in the will. And the other reason why you need to update your will for them is to very intentionally articulate if something were to happen to you or your significant other, who is going to take care of the kid in your absence? If you don't, how do we know who's going to be taking care of your children? Who's going to end up responsible for your child? What if the family member that the state decided should take care of your child isn't someone you approved of? You didn't want them to be in charge of your child. What if they decide that even if there was someone you wanted, that your child should go into the foster care system? Now, because it's a tragic scenario, we don't want to think about it, and it's not top of our mind. It's not top of the list. We want baby snuggles right now. We don't want to be updating a will, but that's all the more reason why I need to mention it to you as something that's important to do. And when it comes to the retirement accounts, you can have beneficiaries and you can have contingent beneficiaries. I list Amanda as my beneficiary on all my retirement accounts, but if something were to happen to both of us, well, what happens to the retirement monies? I have articulated that inherited IRAs are to go to my children if something were to happen to both of us. Oliver and Isaac are listed as equal contingent beneficiaries on every one of our retirement accounts. And this reminds me of another place where you can list beneficiaries, and that's going to be your life insurance policy. Now, this might have been something that would have been better to mention with the updating insurance, but your life insurance, you have got a beneficiary for it. Like Amanda's the beneficiary on my life insurance, and I'm the beneficiary on the one that's on her. But what if something happens to both of us? Well, for us, we have the individuals who are listed to take care of our children in our will as contingent beneficiaries on the life insurance. Because we believe that if they're going to be taking care of the kids, we don't want them to be an undue financial burden. We want them to be financially empowered to do a good job raising the kiddos. So that's not a recommendation. It's not a have to. But it's what I'm doing, and I figure you could benefit from hearing what my plan was. All right, number 4. This is the important one. Freeze your new child's credit. Jay, my child is a baby. They don't know how to talk. They eat, poop, and sleep. Why do I need to worry about freezing their credit? Well, there are two big reasons why I think it's important for you to do this, and the first of which that we're covering comes from ngpf.com. They have a question of the day here on their website. The question is, how many minors have had their identity stolen? And their answer, believe it or not, is 1 in 50. What isn't very clear here is that 1 in 50 is yearly. 1 in 50 children every year has their identity stolen. If we jump over to safehome.org, they clarify that by the end of their childhood, 1 in 10 kids fall victim to identity theft. And for my second point, I'm going to read some of the stories that are here on safehome.org. Jumping right in, one of the first major studies on children identity theft was carried out in 2011. The results were eye-opening. For example, they found that a lot more children fall victim to identity theft than adults. You need to worry about your kid's identity being stolen more than yours. Your kid is a blank slate, and identity thieves like blank slates because they're easier to work with. It sounds a little counterintuitive at first, but it makes sense. We don't check on our children's credit because, well, there's nothing to check, right? They're just kids. Actually, that's precisely why thieves target them, because adults don't check. Thieves can get away with their crime for years with devastating, costly consequences. This is as good of a time as any to say it's a good idea for you to pull your credit report and your children's credit reports, for that matter, once a year, just to see if there's something suspicious on there that you don't recognize, or an error. One victim of the study was a teen from Kentucky named Nathan. At age 14, Nathan already had multiple lines of credit and a foreclosed mortgage in his name. The thief lived thousands of miles away in California. He had even bought a $600,000 home. Again, courtesy of Nathan's social security number. The trail of crimes stretched back a decade to when Nathan was only 4. And I'm only going to share with you one more. Another child victim from Arizona had racked up $725,000 in debt by the time she was 17. There were 8 suspects in this case. 8. And they'd used her credentials to take out mortgages, auto loans, and credit cards, and to pay for medical bills and utilities. I don't know about you, but it's a complete nightmare to imagine one of my kids growing up, getting ready to enter the working world, getting ready to become a college student, getting ready to engage with their personal financial life, just to find out that their identity's been stolen, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and they have a completely trashed credit record due to identity theft. This is why earlier I said you need to have your child added to your identity theft protection plan. And this is why it's so important to take your new child's credit and freeze it so that nobody can open up a credit account, a new line of credit, without having to jump through some extra hoops that you can keep secured. It's really not that hard to steal someone's identity if you have their social security number and a little bit of extra information. And as far as social security numbers go, they're really not that secure. Let's go back to a little clip from the CGP Grey video and find out why.
Social Security number was never designed to be used this way in the long ago, and you can tell because it has no security built into it. Okay, so there's this neat trick that most ID numbers use where they can check themselves to see if they're invalid. The simplest way is to have the last couple digits match the sum of the others. All kinds of ID cards and barcodes do this because it makes it impossible to enter an incorrect number in a computer and makes it harder for fraudsters to guess valid numbers. This is why if you try to buy something online by guessing a credit card number, the website knows it's invalid before you even click buy.
Isn't that interesting? This topic fascinates me. How cool and clever is it that you can build some sort of security trick into a number like that?
But because the Social Security number started life in the long ago, it's just a number with no self-checking security built in. Worse, if you were born pre-2011, it's not that hard to just guess most of the number. The first 3 digits are the state where the parents applied for the card, and the last 4 digits just count up in order, and the middle digits follow a regular pattern. So you can take your number, subtract 1, and that's a valid number of someone who was probably born in the same hospital as you around around the same time. Thus, a fraudster who knows your time and location of birth can probably get the first 5 digits by just looking them up on a chart. Institutions ask for the last 4 digits as a code to identify you as you, which means it's not that hard to put together your number from a security leak anywhere, or just by connecting a few puzzle pieces.
How remarkably disappointing is that? And what's crazy is I've shared with you just now, because it's fun, some of my child's birth story. I didn't tell you specifically the hospital, but you probably know what city I'm from. And you know the month that my child was born. You know when Isaac was born, roughly. You could figure it out. I don't think it would actually be that hard. I think it would be very easy for someone who was good at a little bit of social engineering and detective work to steal his identity, which is why it's all the more important to get his credit frozen. I did this for Oliver, and I'm doing it for Isaac. I received his social security number actually in the mail this past Saturday, this weekend. And as soon as I did, I sprang into action. I went to all 3 credit bureau websites, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Each one of them has a process for putting a security freeze on a minor's credit. All you need to do is send them a packet full of all of the information that someone would need to steal their identity. Isn't that smart? You have one little envelope which has everything in it that is needed to steal the child's identity in the mail right when they're most vulnerable. They don't take this kind of thing over websites for some reason. They have to go snail mail. All 3 of them do this. They have forms, processes, and procedures, and they tell you exactly what to put in, and it's different for all 3 of them. A little frustrating. So yes, you gather up all of the sensitive information about your new child, and in many cases, stuff about you that's sensitive. You put it in an envelope, and you send it to 3 separate organizations that are private companies. They're not government related at all. And you say, please, I trust you with this information. For some reason, put a freeze on their credit. Because this sketches me out, I send it over certified mail just to know that they got it, know that it wasn't lost, and know that the letter wasn't stolen somewhere along the way. But anyway, freezing your child's credit makes it significantly harder for a thief to open up a line of credit. And given that their social security number is not secure really at all, this is probably one of the best things that you can do, shy of having an identity theft protection service, to keep them safe so that when they turn 18, they don't have a trashed credit history. Now, from my experience, you need to know something. You're going to find this out if you pursue freezing your dependent's credit, but you're going to end up getting information back from the credit unions. And this information, in some cases it's a little number, is going to be required to unfreeze the credit. You're going to need to give this number to your minor to take care of so that they can unfreeze their credit, at least temporarily, if they want to go get a mortgage, or if someone needs to have a hard inquiry on their credit history, which will happen. Without that number, they're in for a world of hurt. So you gotta guard that number with your life and make sure that you don't lose it for all 3 credit bureaus. Unless, of course, one of them doesn't require you to have a unique number that they issue for you to unfreeze your credit. Okay, and this leads me to the last thing that I want to share with you, the last thing that I've done in the last couple weeks for my son. And that is to open up an educational savings account, an ESA or a 529 for them. Because I don't know about you, but I've got family members who like to write little birthday cards for the kids, and there's little bits of money in them. What are they going to do with that when they're an infant? You're not going to go and open a savings account for that little baby. Well, that money's going to do a lot more good invested than it is going to do sitting in a piggy bank. So what I've done is I've opened up an educational savings account so that I can take those little bits of money, as well as some of my own, and drop it in the account and let it grow so that they have some money for higher education when they get there. These little kids have so much time on their hands between now and when they're going to need the money for college. And if they don't end up needing it for college, due to the Secured Act 2.0, they can roll it right over into a Roth IRA. If that money wasn't a 529. ESA, you can't do that, but you can move an ESA to a 529. So It almost doesn't matter. As long as you have both accounts there, you can move the ESA money to 529 before it's too late, then roll that into a Roth IRA if they don't use it for higher education. And then basically what you've done is you've opened up an account where that $5 bill, $10 bill, $20 bill that comes in the mail becomes a massive blessing for them down the road and helps set them up for a hope-filled financial future that we can only dream of. Is there something that I forgot today that you would have done in the first 2 weeks after having a kid in the way of managing your personal financial life and theirs? Let me know in the comments below, and until next week, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.